Dr. Alex, the first question. When and where was your first meeting with the Dalai Lama? What are your memories of this meeting?
My first meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in November of 1969. I had gone to India shortly before to do the research for my PhD dissertation in Tibetan Buddhism. And I went to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama in order to introduce myself, tell him what I was doing, and ask for his general advice in my studies and research. At that time, in universities in the United States, the way that Buddhism, specifically the Indian tradition of Buddhism, was taught as a dead subject, like Egyptian studies, and the Tibetan variety of Indian Buddhism was there was very little knowledge of that or understanding. There were hardly any books available, and the ones that were available presented it as some sort of distortion or a degenerate form of Buddhism, calling it, like the Chinese did, Lamaism, which is not at all a term that the Buddhists themselves use. So although I had studied Tibetan language at Harvard University, my professor there was Japanese, and he had no idea how it was actually pronounced. So he just would pronounce it like it was spelled, Bezgrubs rather than Drup. So like that. When I met His Holiness, the main impression that I had, which was quite overwhelming, was that Tibetan Buddhism was very much alive, and it was the successor of the Indian Buddhist tradition, and that here were people who actually understood what it means. They weren't like my professors, who basically were guessing, like trying to figure out a crossword puzzle with their dictionaries and some commentaries that were available. So this was a very, very strong impression that I had, and it convinced me that I really wanted to pursue my studies with the Tibetans. So those were my impressions.
How often have you met with the Dalai Lama during your life, and what was the reason for your conversations?
Well, I can't even count the number of times that I've met His Holiness. I met him many, many times in various different contexts. After I went back to, I did the research for my PhD dissertation by studying with Geshe Ngawang Targye, where I studied basically the oral tradition of Lamrim. At that time, the Lamrim, the greatest stages of the path, there was nothing available in English language about them. It was a completely unknown topic. And the way that I studied it was not knowing what would follow, but just, one topic after another. I had gone to various teachings of His Holiness during that period of 2.5 years when I was doing this research. And at the end of it, His Holiness had built the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, and asked my teacher, Geshe Ngawang Targye, to be the teacher for courses that would be taught on Buddhism there to foreigners. And he asked the two young Rinpoches who were helping me with translation to be the interpreters for those courses. And I asked if I could be of help as well During these 2.5 years, His Holiness had already given us several small texts to translate that he had published. So I had, conversation with him about those previously, and I asked him if I could be of help as well with the programs at the library, and His Holiness said, yes, you can, but go back and hand in your dissertation and get the degree and then come back. So I did that. While I was in Dharamsala, after that, all in all, I lived for 29 years in India, mostly in Dharamsala. After I went back to work at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, there I was one of the people that started the Translation Bureau, and we continued translating texts that His Holiness would assign us to translate. And again, would consult with His Holiness about that. Meanwhile, I also started studying with one of His Holiness's tutors, Senchop Serkum Rinpoche. And as my Tibetan language improved, because at Harvard I had only studied the written language, but while in India I learned the spoken language, then I started to do translations for His Holiness when he taught. At first, what I did was just take extensive notes in English of his teachings and then read them to Westerners, foreigners, I should say, who came. I would read it to them afterwards. And then eventually I started doing simultaneous translation of His Holiness, sometimes consecutive translation, sometimes simultaneous translation of the teachings. So obviously I would meet His Holiness in these contexts. Then after Senchop Serkum Rinpoche died in 1983, I was asked to accompany His Holiness for, I think it was 2 foreign trips as a liaison for his teachings. You see, starting in 1985, after I had translated, again, not translated, no, I commented. I gave lectures at the Kala Chakra initiation that His Holiness held in Recon, Switzerland. After that, I started visiting the former communist countries of Eastern Europe. And through my teaching in a hidden fashion Buddhism there to groups of people who were interested. And during the subsequent years, while they were still under communist rule, I went to almost all of them in Eastern Europe, and starting in, I think it was 1988, the Soviet Union as well. And because of my contacts there, then with various interested people and so on, then I was a liaison for His Holiness's first visits to these countries after the fall of communism. So I had a lot of contact with him, obviously, as in some capacity as liaison with the local organizers and also as his interpreter. Then His Holiness asked me to conduct various projects for him around the world. So these included treating the Chernobyl victims in the Soviet Union with Tibetan medicine in conjunction with the Ministry of Health of the Soviet Union. And I traveled with His Holiness's private physician doing that, Dr. Tenzing Churak, and went to Russia many times and always reported to His Holiness. Also, I went on many large world tours to universities and Buddhist centers in all over the world, about 70 different countries, making first contact for the Tibetans in many of the countries of Africa and the Middle East and so on. And also saw His Holiness quite a number of times in making reports about what was going on. Also, a very large tour around China, looking at the situation of Buddhism among the non-Tibetans, among the various Mongol groups in China. So over those years, while I was living and based in India, I saw His Holiness many, many times. After that, when I moved to Germany at the end of 1998, then here to Berlin, I eventually started the putting together all of my collected works, manuscripts, and so on that I had collected from all the teachings that I had received and translated, and prepared them with some other people to put online, and started a website, Berzin Archives, in 2001. And this eventually in 2016, we rebranded it and redid it as studybuddhism.com. And throughout all of this period, I would, when I went back to India, I would meet with His Holiness, and or when I met him when he was teaching in Europe or in America, and I would report to him what I was doing, and he gave me advice as to what he would like to see on the website. One of the projects that I had done for His Holiness years before was to start a Buddhist-Muslim dialogue, and His Holiness encouraged with the website to translated it into the various Islamic languages, Arabic, Farsi, Turkish, Urdu, etc., and make knowledge of Buddhism available in the Islamic world. Not to convert them or anything like that, but as I had reported from lecturing in universities in the Middle East, there was a great deal of interest in learning about various other cultures and various other religions among young people. So His Holiness encouraged me to do that with the website. So over the years, I've met with His Holiness many, many, many times in various different contexts.
What qualities of the Dalai Lama inspire you, and what have you learned from him?
All of his qualities are absolutely amazing. I have never met anyone as intelligent as His Holiness and as compassionate as His Holiness. His Holiness has a full mastery of all the different aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, and is able to explain very, very clearly. He's memorized the largest number of texts of probably anybody, and is able to quote, from any place just immediately. His compassion is utterly outstanding, and because he has a memory not only for information, but he also has a memory of people. I remember once I was at an audience with His Holiness when he was meeting a group of new arrivals from Tibet. And in the group, there was one old monk. And His Holiness pointed to him and he said, "I remember you when I made the trip to China in 1954. We passed your monastery, and the monks in your monastery made a mandala offering to me, and you were the one holding up the mandala plate. And I remember it was very heavy, and you had difficulty holding it for that whole part of the ritual." And I mean, this is unbelievable how much this monk had aged. over all those years, and yet nobody is too insignificant for His Holiness to remember. What have I learned from, and His Holiness's energy is also unbelievable. Senship Serkon Rinpoche once told me that he had traveled together with His Holiness by car from Manali back to Dharamsala after some teaching there. And that's a very long ride. That must take about 10 or 12 hours and is very, very winding and is really a very grueling and tiring ride. And at the end of it, Serkon Rinpoche himself was absolutely exhausted, but His Holiness immediately got up and immediately engaged in all sorts of activities immediately after that. Also, I've seen, when I've been with His Holiness during some of his Western tours, it is extraordinary because he goes from one event to another event to another event to another event without any stop or rest in between. And no matter where he's walking, even in his hotel, going from the door to the elevator, he's surrounded by people. And His Holiness is never hesitant to engage with the people, to sign autographs when they ask him, and so on. And he never loses his patience and has this amazing warmth with everybody that he meets that you get his total, attention, because his focus is so intense with this sincere concern for you as a human being and for your welfare. So this is quite an amazing feature of His Holiness. What have I learned from him? Well, I've learned to try to follow his example as much as my limited capacity allows me to do that, and to take people seriously the way that he does. Also, what I try to follow very much is his emphasis on always relying on the Nalanda masters, the Indian masters of Nalanda University, and all their commentaries to the various texts. And so in the research and the writing that I do, especially nowadays, I'm very involved with a very in-depth study of karma. I am turning to all the Indian commentaries, to the basic texts, and uncovering from it all the depth of meaning that is there. So this is something very much that I've learned from His Holiness, and also to be very universal in the approach that we take on the website and our social media, because we have a great deal of social media as well as just a website for Study Buddhism. And so to make the material there available in as many of the major languages of the world as possible. In other words, to reach out to as many people as possible. So this is these are some of the things that I've learned from His Holiness that I could just say off the top of my head. I'm sure if I had more time to think about it, I would come up with more.
Why does the Dalai Lama call himself a simple monk? Also, traditionally, he is considered an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. How can these two characteristics tell about the Dalai Lama? Who is a Buddhist monk and who is Avalokiteshvara?
Well, he considers himself a simple monk because he is a monk, and that's simply what he is. So he doesn't, he's extremely humble. And although he has to function and live within a society in which there are a great deal of rituals and formality and so on. He himself does not prefer these. He prefers to be very humble and down to earth. And so in this sense, he calls himself a simple monk who follows all the vows of the monk's vows of Vinaya. So in this sense, he's like that. But being the human incarnation or representation of Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha embodying compassion, he takes that responsibility, takes on that role very seriously, as he does the fact that all of the Tibetans place all their hope on him. So he accepts this responsibility, the responsibility of the Dalai Lama and the traditional role of the Dalai Lama, but without, in a sense, aggrandizing himself into being some sort of god or something like that, which he never says that he is. In fact, very often he would say that, he's no god or anything like that. He's just an ordinary person with pain in his knees. And so if somebody could help him with a pain in his knees, then he would be very grateful. Everything depends on mental labeling. Everything derises dependently on mental labeling. And since His Holiness has many, many qualities, excellent qualities, then you can label him in terms of one set of qualities or another set of qualities. So in terms of his keeping of the monastic vows of Vinaya, he's a simple monk. In terms of him compassionately dealing with all living beings, and especially his emphasis on universal, what is it called, human values, his secular ethics, in which he wants to promote and has been very successfully promoting basic human values of compassion, honesty, kindness, and so on, as something which is can be shared by people of not only all religions, but by people without any religious belief at all. And so when you look at this aspect of His Holiness, with which he is compassionately dealing with not just the people of Tibet, not just all Buddhists, but is dealing, and not just all humans, but all living beings, then you could label that as being the embodiment of Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig.
The Dalai Lama has given many times great Chakra initiations. What is this teaching about? And why did the Dalai Lama transmit this most complex tantric system openly around the world? What benefits does this bring to people?
One important thing to remember about Chakra initiation is that, as His Holiness himself has said, that when he gives this initiation, his main emphasis is not on the initiation. His main emphasis is on the preliminary teachings of the basic teachings of the Buddha on compassion and wisdom. So bodhicitta and the understanding of voidness or emptiness. The Chakra initiation is something which traditionally, going back to the time when it was first conferred by the Buddha, is something that has always gathered together an enormous number of people. And it continues to do that for some incredible reason, hard to really understand. And the line of Dalai Lamas has been very closely affiliated with the Chakra teachings and giving the Chakra initiation. So His Holiness follows that tradition. But when he gives it, then as he says, it is an opportunity for gathering an opportunity in which a very large number of people, sometimes in Bodh Gaya, for example, about 200,000 people, to gather together in a peaceful atmosphere. So that's why sometimes some people call the Kala Chakra initiation Kala Chakra initiation for world peace. And in that actual gathering, then His Holiness can teach them about compassion and wisdom. So this is his main aim. Then as for the actual initiation, this in a sense, as the Tibetans always look at it, plant seeds for people to, in the future, to be able to live in a golden age when the spiritual teachings will flourish. That's referred to as being in a land of Shambhala, and that they will be able to practice these teachings more fully in future lives or at that time of the dawn of a golden age. So he doesn't actually expect that very many people will involve themselves in the actual practice of Kala Chakra. Kala Chakra is so very few people actually engage, among the Tibetans and Mongols in the actual practice, although there were various monasteries, particularly in the Mongol regions, that did the rituals. So Kala Chakra means cycles of time or rounds of time. And this refers to the fact that you can count cycles of time externally in terms of the movement of the planets and the heavenly bodies. You can count it by internal cycles of the movement of the energies in the body and the general life cycle of birth, aging, old age, and death. And you can also look at it in terms of internal cycles, not internal cycles, but alternative cycles in terms of dealing with the various energy systems and so on within the body and transforming them into methods for attaining enlightenment. So the external and internal cycles are under the influence of karmic impulses, and what are referred to in Kala Chakra teachings as the winds of karma, or the energy winds of karma, both externally moving the planets and the internal ones moving the energies in the life and regulating the lifespan and the ages of life. And the whole point of the practice is to overcome being under the influence of these karmic impulses of time and transform the energies that are involved into various methods for attaining enlightenment. And these entail a generation stage, which has very, very complex visualizations with a huge mandala of 722 deities in it, which is so extensive because samsara, these cycles, external and internal cycles, are so extensive and complex. And each of these figures represents various aspects, both externally and internally. And upon mastery of the generation stage, then complete stage practices with which one works with the subtle energies of the body in order to gain access to the subtlest level of mind called clear light, and to use that as the most efficient vehicle for gaining having non-conceptual cognition of voidness and attaining enlightenment. So, as I said, His Holiness doesn't actually expect people to really engage in these practices, but his main emphasis is on the general introductory teachings.
If you look at the long life of the Dalai Lama, what is his place and role in the history of the 20th and 21st centuries?
Well, you can look at, His Holiness says that he feels particularly close to the fifth Dalai Lama and the 13th Dalai Lama, who were very great innovators for Tibet, both in its monastic and political structure. So you can look also at His Holiness, the present 14th Dalai Lama, in terms of his important role in the context of both Tibet and the Tibetan people and Tibetan politics, and also on the world stage. So in the context of Tibet and the Tibetan people, he has ended the custom which began with the fifth Dalai Lama of the Dalai Lamas being the heads of both the government and, in a sense, the titular head, the title head of all the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. And he's given up that political role. He's instituted democracy among the Tibetan people, and he has successfully led the Tibetan people in exile after the communist takeover of Tibet, the communist Chinese takeover of Tibet. And he has reinstated all of the major institutions of Tibet in exile, and has made knowledge of Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhism very widespread, and of the Tibetan cause very widespread around the world. In terms of so this is his great contribution to Tibetan society. And in terms of the world, he has instituted a meeting of Western science or modern science and Buddhism, so that you now have the Mind-Life conferences, which have been going on for decades now, and looking for the interface of or the interaction, where Buddhism and science can meet. That science has a great deal to offer to Tibetan society, and the Buddhist teachings have a great deal to offer, particularly about the mind, have a great deal to offer to science. So this has instituted the scientific study of the mind, of consciousness, of emotions, which have been going on for decades now. He, in his general emphasis on basic human values or universal values, His Holiness has promoted the teaching of this to children. He says that the best hope for the future is basically with the children, and adding to modern education, not only education concerning material factors, but also education concerning the emotions, the mind, and how to deal with disturbing emotions. And so he has inspired and started, been behind and advised many programs now that are taught, that have been developed and that are taught in schools in many countries around the world, to introduce this type of education to children. So this is an enormous contribution that he has made to society in general. So these are some of the contributions that I can think of at the moment.
Why now, in the 21st century, there are different religious teachings and religious leaders, and they are not guarantees of peace in the whole world? Has a religion lost its power to influence public consequences? Are universal values in decline? Is there a way to preserve peace and our civilization? What can we do positively in this direction?
Well, that's very difficult to speak in terms of leaders of other non-Buddhist religions. So I can't really speak in those terms, although certainly many of the religions, leaders of the various religions do come together and do discuss various issues concerning the promotion of peace. How successful that is? Well, even in terms of the Buddha can only offer methods to help people to overcome suffering, but a Buddha can't eliminate the suffering of others, like pulling out a thorn from the foot. People need to follow the methods that he taught to eliminate their own suffering. So you could say that this is the same as well in terms of whatever teachings the various leaders of the various religions of the world give. But in terms of His Holiness, he certainly is trying to promote world peace by his promotion of the teaching of basic human values in the education system. And he says that it is often quite difficult to affect the values and actions of adults, where their habits are very well have been well strengthened over their lifetimes. But for children who are much more open-minded, that then this is the place where you can affect bringing about world peace in the long term. And so His Holiness always looks in terms of the long-term effects rather than immediate short-term ones, because short-term ones are very difficult to actually change into long-term ones, because the nature of samsara is that it goes up and down. So sometimes things go better, sometimes they go worse, and things go better and worse in different parts of the world, and everything dependently arises on everything else. So bringing about world peace is not just, will not arise dependently on just spiritual teachings, and will not arise only on, based only on people following the basic excellent values of spiritual teachings, but are going to arise dependently on many, many factors: economics, education, climate, political systems, individuals in power, and so on. So if you look in terms of dependent arising, then all that one can do, even as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is to contribute to the amount of the number of things that will affect the situation of the world.
What can we, the followers of the Dalai Lama, do to preserve his spiritual heritage, to preserve and develop dharma?
The advice is to follow his basic advice of putting into practice basic human values. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a Buddhist practitioner, or that you have to engage in various Buddhist practices. The main thing is to be a kind, understanding, patient, forgiving human being, and to look at all others as having the same qualities as we have, the same basic qualities as we have. As His Holiness always says, no matter whom he meets, he always looks at them as being the same. We are all the same. And His Holiness always emphasizes that we have to look at all of humanity. I mean, if we're not able to look in terms of all living beings, but at least look in terms of all humanity, and that we are all the same. We all have the same basic emotions. We all have the same basic abilities. As His Holiness jokes, we all have two eyes and a nose, and we therefore are all equal in this respect. And he always emphasizes the basic Buddhist premise is that everybody wants to be happy and nobody wants to be unhappy. This pertains not just to human beings, but to all life forms with a mind. And so everybody, therefore, strives for happiness and to eliminate happiness, and no one is entitled, in a sense, to more than anybody else. We're all equal. So this is the main teaching of His Holiness that people need to follow, and also to, if we take from the teachings on voidness or emptiness, the basic premise of it. The basic premise is to see reality and to accept reality, even if we don't understand it completely. But we need to be able to identify the projections that we have on reality and to see that they don't correspond to anything real, and just see and accept what is the reality of what's going on with us, with others, in the environment, and so on, and deal with it in a wise and compassionate way. So these are the things that I think that all of us can do in order to maintain the legacy of His Holiness.
Please tell us a story that characterizes the Dalai Lama.
There are several that stand out. One I recall was just his enthusiasm, strength and patience, which was an early encounter with His Holiness. In 1971, His Holiness gave a transmission and teaching, a very rare one, on the 4 collected commentaries to the Guhya Samaja Tantra. And at the conclusion of this, His Holiness invited everybody, and they were talking about thousands of people, to come up past the throne, and he bent all the way over from the throne in a very uncomfortable position and held these very heavy texts, while thousands of people, one by one, came by, and he touched their heads with this text. This was absolutely extraordinary, how any human being would be able to do that and sustain that. So that was just simply on the basis of his physical abilities. But another thing that I recall, that because you asked for something that surprised me, that he would do that and that he could do that. But another thing that surprised me was his diplomatic skills. I was translating for him as the interpreter at a meeting with the parliamentary leaders in Holland, in The Hague. And one of the leaders asks, what can we here in Holland do to help the Tibet issue? And His Holiness looked at them and he said, nothing. There's nothing that you can do. Holland is a small country, and the Netherlands is a small country, and there's nothing that you can do that would be of help. And this surprised me, but actually it was the perfect answer, because the politicians replied, well, no, we can do this and we can do that. There are many things that we can do in terms of speaking up at the United Nations and so on. So his skillful means, his mastery of skillful methods and his diplomacy is absolutely astounding. So that is also an example of something that really surprised me. I mean, then also, of course, when he's teachings, when His Holiness brings up points of his understanding that never dawned on me, and explains things that are really quite baffling. This also is, wonderful, wonderful, amazing.